Okay, so here's the thing. This is what I'm going to make a video on. What my video is going to be on is kind of going to be a mix of two things. First of all, I want to discuss the weather. I don't know how many charts for the 4th of July weekend this year, and compare it to how it was on the 4th of July weekend last year. Keep in mind that this year is July 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Last year I'm gonna do July 3rd, 4th, 5th. Though I will include the context in both cases. Though there isn't really that much context this time. But just for a basic rundown, temperatures in June have started off the month well above average. Well, not the first day, where the lows were actually quite chilly the highs were quite chilly, despite the previous day getting up to 93 degrees across the New York metro area. A backdoor cold front slashes temperatures, and daily highs are nearly 2.5 dozen degrees colder than the day before. The backdoor cold front comes in at about 8 o'clock at night, and isn't the rarest thing in the world, but I don't want to say it happens frequently either. However, the heat begins to build back up. However, there is a weekend with relatively low humidity and beaming sunshine that puts the lows into the mid-50s, but the highs start out in the low 70s, but creep up into the upper 70s. Then we get a windy day, so for the 4th day in a row, but the last day in a row, morning low temperatures do creep into the 50s across the metro area of New York, and the highs are in the mid-70s. I'm not being exact, I'm giving ranges. Some areas might have actually even gotten to 80 on that Monday, June 6th. Now, then we have an incoming round of storms. So for 2 days, lows are kept in the upper 60s, with highs hitting the mid 80s. The first day there was predicted to be a big rainstorm, but that wound up missing. But the second day, which was June 9th at this point, did have a big rainstorm. This cold front couldn't cap off temperatures in the morning, but the next day, we do get our precious lows back into the 50s across the metro area. The upper 50s. The upper 50s. But the next weekend, we wouldn't get that. And we haven't had that many days in the 50s in June. At least not as many as I would have liked. For at least my current location, it happened on June 1st, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. I'm not going to show my hand for all the calculations. 10th, 18th, because after a very warm June 17th, a strong cold front comes in. 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. So 12 days. And again, like half of them in the second half of the month. But I think that we might actually be done with that. Though, over the last couple of days, what's the weather right now? 77. And it's 7:43 p.m. So, it was an above average day here. Today got into the mid 80s. I mean, I was traveling, but it got into the mid 80s. Across the metro area. By metro area, of course, I mean Long Island. It's going to be way different if you go talk about New Jersey. That's way warmer typically. Anyway, Anyway, so after that delightful period of below average temperatures in June, which I'm not being sarcastic, and I actually did like it, the heat and the humidity begins to rise. There were some days where the lows, even though the highs were in the upper 70s, it was raining, which actually kept the lows, interestingly, in the upper 60s. And it almost became a day that is what we call stuck in the 70s, which is essentially where the high and low temperature is both in the 70s. There are two stuck in the 80s types of days, but that's despicable weather that we don't talk about. Mainly because if you think about it, the nighttime low temperature is 80, think what the dew point's going to be, upper 70s. It's gonna raise the temperature so much that even though, I mean, it could be upper 80s, and then it could feel like you're in the 110s with the humidity that you're more than likely going to endure. Now, anyway, on June 29th and 30th, when they briefly think that we're going to get back to the 50s, it doesn't. All we get is the lower 60s. Highs of 28th get into the upper 70s. 28th, 29th, it gets to the lower 80s. The 30th to the mid 80s, and the low temperatures here are kept in the mid 60s. And in the next couple nights, actually look like they're going to creep into the lows in the upper 70s, lower 70s, and the upper 60s before they begin to slowly fall back down. Though I'm going to be on a trip, so I'll be in hot, humid Virginia. Yay! So what happens is that you get to this thing, and you have a buildup of heat and humidity. Because tomorrow, I think the lows are across my area are in the upper 60s, and the highs mid 80s. So there's actually a slight risk of severe weather that will put in, because on July 2nd, a big storm is going to tear through. This is going to push the lows into the lower 70s, but keep the highs off, cap them off in the lower 80s, assuming everything goes to plan. One small miscalculation, and it could easily turn into the upper 80s. July 3rd, the temperature begins to improve with lows getting into the upper 60s, highs in the mid 80s, and the 4th of July looks like lows in the mid 60s across Long Island, highs again mid 80s for the 4th of July. Temperatures will not really be rising the same way they did last time at this time. Rather, they will instead kind of be falling. But this heat wave is not as bad as the heat wave last June, where it took multiple cold fronts to cool us off. For some context, Father's Day weekend was quite hot. The first day had lows in the mid 60s and highs in the upper 80s. Then the next 2 days had lows in the upper 60s and highs in the low to mid 80s, with quite a bit of humidity. June 22nd starts off that same way too, but at 10 a.m. things change. The high temperature gets to around 80 degrees and then it begins to fall. So despite the morning lows being in the low 70s, the actual low temperature for the day wound up being around 60 degrees because of a cold front that was coming through. And this let the temperatures fall to the mid 50s on June 22nd. June 23rd. And they also fell to the mid 50s on June 24th. Highs were in the mid 70s. Which means 2022 was a bit ahead of schedule for that. Though the thing is that final 50s didn't really happen last year because it happened even into the depths of the summer. Whereas this year, that really didn't. This year is probably not going to happen, especially given how 2022's weather forecast of weather has been unique. It hasn't really been what I've seen tracking weather so far. It's been a new experience. Some of the things I see, I really have just never noticed in any previous years. Some of the patterns, like how quickly, like how close together our final 30s and final 40s are, which is like a week and a half. Never have I seen them be that close before. And then look, you wind up getting like a week and a half in a row with nighttime lows somewhere in the 50s. Because our first night of 60 does not occur for, typically you have lows in the 60s and then a day with lows in the 40s because something. 2022 has been a very slow year in terms of its adaptations once you got to the spring, and it really just has been interesting to see the weather and see it change, and just how slowly it's been able to really adapt to things, and how it's always been stuck in these temperature ranges. And I think that it's a pattern that we're going to see continue through the summer. Through the summer, we're probably going to see this pattern continue. But last year was a bit more chaotic in this regards. And then the thing is that the heat and humidity begins to build up into June 25th, 26th. By June 27th, it gets to the low 80s, but humidity makes it feel like it's about 90, so you know it's getting humid. Lows start getting into the 70s. We have not had a day yet with a low in the 70s here, but that's bound to change. It probably has happened in New York City, but I don't feel like checking. Oh wait, no, I know it has. As early as May 22nd, in fact. See, the low on the island got to the mid-60s, but in New York City, the low temperature was capped off at 72 degrees. And it's definitely been other days where it's happened. I just haven't been following closely with the weather to see that happen in New York City because, let's be honest, I don't even live in New York City, so I don't really care what goes on there. I only do it to make videos. I mean, I'll probably check, just kind of because why not, but I mean, I don't have to. And then this building heat wave pushes high temperatures into the low 90s. However, the further west you went, some of the days the closer to the upper 90s it went. And then the lows kept creeping up too into the mid 70s. June 30th, the low is in a sultry upper 70s in the morning, but falls to the mid 70s by night because of a crashing cold front. This is cold front number 1, and it keeps the high temperatures on July 1st of last year into the mid 80s. But that wasn't enough. Temperatures finally fall to the low 70s. But that wasn't enough because after the morning low in about 70 degrees, highs were capped off in the mid 70s and lows fall to the mid 60s. Then we have the day where the temperature plummets from the mid 60s down to 59 degrees on July 3rd. This happened everywhere. It was pretty uniform. 59 degrees. So on July 4th, we wake up with the low at 59 or 60, highs getting up to the mid 70s, lows then on July 5th fall back into the mid 60s, highs in the low 80s. It's a bit of deja vu with Memorial Day weekend and how that turned out. Except that the really cold conditions lasted for only one day instead of 2. Like the brutal cold. And it's kind of funny how it fell out that way. But what I definitely will say is that 2022's winter, the winter part of it has been more exciting than 2021. If we compare the first 6 months of weather, because we kind of can do that, we can see this pattern. See, last winter, January, the high was where I live at least, 53 degrees. And the low, 14 degrees. For February, last year, the low got down to 12 and the high got up to 54. compare that to this year and the excitement that we get. In January, the low gets down to 9 and the high gets up to 59. Though that was in the balmy two first days, as there's a giant buildup of heat that winds up leading to an Arctic front. Our very cold January, that was over 3 degrees below average, would not have been possible without our warm Christmas break, and I'm kind of lucky it fell that way, because the next time we get a warm week will be February break. Oh wait, we're in Seattle. But yes, that was a very warm week. And February this year had the low temperature for February was actually only 15 degrees. I hate to disappoint, but cheer up, the high would get to 69 degrees, which made it 1 degree shy of a very early first 70. Our first 70, though, would wind up not being able to happen until April 12th. So let that soak in for a second. That despite it being that, I mean, in March it only got to 68 degrees too. So February had a high temperature higher than March. 68 degrees was higher than March this year. Last year, March had a day with a high of 82 degrees, I hate to say. Very early first 80, especially when compared to this year. The low in March last year was 21 degrees, and this year would be about the same. About the same. But it is starting to blend out. April, last year had a high of 74. This year the high in April would only be 73. The low last April did get down to 30 this year, 34. So it's beginning to narrow up. And I mean, in terms of precipitation and weather events, it has been interesting, especially with temperature swings. But the temperature is beginning to moderate a bit, and temperature swings are becoming less extreme. The winter and the early spring is when they are at their worst. May, I will say, at first glance looks more exciting. The low got down to 40 or 41 in May. High got up to 93 compared to last year, where the low got down to 42 and the high got up to 89. But that's a false flag. First of all, the city actually got down to only to 47 that day, and their low was 45 on a different set of days. Second of all, I do need to emphasize one specific thing. I need to emphasize how the last week of April was severely below normal, with not severely, but a bit below normal, with highs typically getting into the upper 50s to lower 60s, but lows frequently getting to about 40. And then on May 2nd, a warm front pushes through. While the initial warm front coming through caps the high at 55, it keeps the low at a relatively nice 50. With the next day being a 49.59. We got another 49.59 on the 6th of May as the cold front comes down, so everyone said it was yucky, even though I didn't think it was yucky. Then we get a 49.64, and everyone was shocked that it actually got to 64. It was not supposed to get that warm. And it was, of course, at 6 o'clock. Then the 5th of May is a 53.71. Then the 49.59. Then a 51.45 on the day before Mother's Day. Mother's Day itself is 58.45. Then we have a day with a low of 44 and a high of 69. And while the next day after that had a low of either 49 or 50, even if it did get to 49, the high being 72, even if it gets to 49, that still would be our last day in the 40s. Last year was Memorial Day, it was May 31st. Initially thought to have been June 1st, where everyone initially thought that the mercury here shot down to 49. Turns out, bit of an underestimate of the temperature. The low actually only got to 51. But 51 will be the low of their June, whereas this June will be 54. And the high last June got to 91 here. New York City had the warmest day very early, June 30th with 98, but here was August 27th at 93. This year, our June had a high of 91. Last year it was like also 91. But I do want you to see how our year is becoming blander. I mean, our first day at 80 was literally May 22nd, and while that was also our first day at 90, which was, maybe last year happened on May 23rd, maybe it was June 6th, which would be ahead of last year. Honestly, comparing 2021 and 2022's weather can be quite fun. I can make a whole video out of it. As in a lot of ways, they are quite similar, except for 50. If we look at it, if you look at it, and by the way, when I say last 50, I mean last 40s, because guess what? And initially, they thought it got down to 48 as well on May 25th, but then the temperatures revised it up to only have it get down to 50 degrees. I think some small parts of the island might have been able to get down to the 40s that day. I mean, honestly, I felt that the temperature was kind of mocking. Not gonna lie. Because if you think about it, it's like the temperature works so hard to get down there, but it can't even push it down. And unlike May 10th, even if it was 50, it'll be a roundup, so like 49.5 to 49.99. This was a day where it would be 50 to 50.49, as no wind chill could be felt according to the National Weather Service. Like if you compare this to last year, the last day in the 20s was March 26th. This year it was March 30th. But the last freeze this year was also March 30th, whereas last year it was April 3rd. As far as the last day in the 30s, last year it was April 23rd. This year it was more than likely April 28th or 29th, even though accurate is being difficult in saying April 21st. As far as our last day in the 40s, this is where the May divergence occurs. This year it's like May 9th or 10th. Last year it was May 31st. And as far as the last day in the 50s, well, this is the last day written for two reasons. First of all, we had to see if July can even make it to the 50s. And I'm going to be traveling, so I might not be following up with the weather that much, because I'll be worried about where I am and not really what happens here a lot. But let's see, can even make it to the 50s down here? Even if it can, even if it can't, July 3rd and 4th, we have one day of July 3rd, and then we can say the first time it got back there, excluding July 31st, would be September 3rd. And we could use that as a point of comparison if it fails to make it to the 50s at all. Because last year, yeah, it was July 4th actually. Now, as far as here, in June, up to this point in the year, that's what I'm going to say, it would be June 23rd, which is actually what it was this year too, just a bit higher up in the 50s this year. Now, as far as our first night with a low in the 60s, I actually don't exactly remember when this was in 2021. It might have been similar. I know this year was May 21st. Last year it might have been May 23rd. But they had a low get to a very tricky 69 degrees the next day. Like actually, damn. Yeah. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this video of me complaining about the weather yet again. I know I do this a lot, but I mean, the weather kind of sucks. So yeah, that's what I am going to say. And then I'm going to make a video of my favorite month's weather for the first half of the year. I am making a lot of these videos recapping the first half of the year worth of weather because honestly, I kind of enjoy it. Okay, thanks for watching.